Hello folks, KR King here, and I'm at GrandCon here in downtown Grand Rapids, and I'm with Banana Chan. She's a game designer. She's worked in all sorts of genres. I've been talking to her this weekend about different things. She was gracious enough to do an interview with me. So for my viewers out there, Banana, tell me a little bit about yourself, about, I guess, what got you into role-playing and game design in the first place.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Banana. I am the owner and co-founder of a small box RPG and board game publishing company called Game in a Curry. And basically when we first started, it was just like publishing our friends' games. Like we were really interested in games. We were really interested in just like small experiences, small board games. And from there we sort of evolved into creating role-playing games. And so I got into role-playing games. I do like a lot of publishing, but I also do like a lot of design work. So I do design work, I do development. Recently I worked on Betrayal, House on the Haunted Hill, 3rd edition. And I also worked on Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the 5th edition version, and I did a little bit of contract writing for them. So I've done like stuff all over.
It's an impressive resume. When you look her up, as I'm sure you guys will, you know, obviously my channel is mainly about 5e, or not, it's about Dungeons and Dragons, but also 5e. So you worked on Ravenloft.
Yes.
How did you come about that, and how was your experience doing that?
Yeah, so I would say that like my career sort of snowballed a lot. So when we first started, I would say maybe back in like, this was like 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was writing LARPs, and as I was writing LARPs, I won a couple of awards. I got some recognition for that, and from there, I started writing for Kids on Bikes. So I met a bunch of people. I met John, Doug, and from there, I just met more and more people in the industry. And so when it got to the time where you know, I started writing for Van Richten's Guide, that was maybe about 2 years ago. I had met Wes Schneider at Big Bad Con, and from there we started communicating, and one thing led to another, and now I'm like writing for Van Richten.
And how was your experience working on the Ravenloft thing?
It was interesting. So it's definitely, so I've had experience working with IPs already. So at that point I had worked on Scooby Betrayal. And so it was sort of like a good fit because I know how to work with IPs, I know the parameters.
And when you say IP, just to help my viewers.
Right, intellectual property. So intellectual property, when you're creating something that's not your own, you usually have to think about like, okay, does this fit with their branding? Does this fit with like the things that they're working on, their vision? And so sometimes you have to take a back seat when it comes to writing for IP, intellectual property. So there might be stuff that you really wanted in the book. Maybe it's not going to get added in. And that's okay because you sign a contract, this is for a job, this is for someone else. And so you sort of have to keep that in mind when you're doing any sort of contract work for someone else. You
told me that you did a LARP, which is live action role play, and that's what got you into the hobby. And tell us a little bit. I'm sure most of my viewers, I'm a little aware of it, but tell us what LARP or live action role play means.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that like a lot of people, when they think of LARP, they think of like fireball and like boffer swords. So that's like foam swords that they use to like to hit each other with when they're like playing a game where you're pretending to be like knights or something like that. For me, I got into LARP through something called American Freeform LARP. And so American Freeform LARP is a lot more freeform. You don't have to do costuming. It's usually, it takes about like 2 hours to play, 2 to 3 hours to play. And it's a smaller group. It's a smaller, more intimate group with like maybe 4 to 6 people. And so that's how I got into LARP. I met up with Jason Morningstar. I played one of his games, Juggernaut, and that's how I got really, really into LARP. Like I got really obsessed with like American Freeform games, like more intimate experiences. And American Freeform, because it is based around, it's basically designed around a convention setting because it's hard for people to like meet one another.
Right.
That's sort of that was something that I was like hungry for because I want like short, intimate experiences that have a lot of depth and they have to be really weird. And so, yeah, I got really into it.
Okay, and so then you do this, and had you played any war games or had you played role-playing games before you got into the LARP system? Were you always kind of someone who did that, or was it not really?
Yeah, so I play a little bit of wargaming. So I guess I wasn't really big into it. Like the few experiences that I had fun, but it wasn't something that like really sucked me in. It wasn't until I actually played a few LARPs that was when I was like, okay, like this is really exciting to me. This is really interesting to me. I want to write for this. And so I started writing for that, and then I started writing for tabletop role-playing games because they're sort of adjacent.
Right. Banana has brought, this is her game.
Yes. This is Jiangshi, In The Banquet Hall,
Okay.
and it is a tabletop role-playing game that uses an original system. It is based around a Chinese-American family running a restaurant in the 1920s, and at night having vampires come out. And so you play the Chinese-American family, and it's a lot of hijinks. It's a lot of managing the restaurant, making sure that you don't become like a paranormal entity, and it's a lot about like family dynamics, the immigrant experience, and just trying to survive.
But it has this mystical thing, and it's won at least one award. What's the?
Yeah, so it got nominated 3 times for an Emmy this year, and we won 1 silver Emmy.
Okay.
So yeah,
it's better than 99%, folks. But and I've read some reviews of this on what is the geek? Tabletop. I've read some really great reviews on this.
Thank you.
This is really interesting. Now, when I was a kid, and this might not be. I don't know, Big Trouble in Little China. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Now, I loved that when I was young. I don't know, but because it had this mysticism to it, it had this sense. Now, as I say, to me, when I looked at this and I thought about this as a perfect melding of that sort of the cultural thing and the idea that you're running this business, that you've got this family structure. And I looked at some of the sample play, and they have like a barber or something on your sample thing that knows a lot of secrets. So the other thing is you have this tight-knit community of people who all know each other, and it's sort of like a small town within a larger community. So that was cool. And the idea, of course, we do want, on the cover, they've got this vampire figure. That's what we want. It isn't just, build your restaurant against competitors, right? There is this thing where you could lose your soul or something, I assume.
Exactly. And so the characters that we have, we're trying to make them very human. So they're very human. They're very much like very much regular characters. You're just regular people thrown into weird supernatural situations. And so how do you manage that? I actually forgot to mention that this was also one of the reasons why I got asked to write for Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
Okay, well, there you go, folks. So if you're trying to break in, first you got to have an award-winning game, and then you're asked to do that. Just to clarify, in case you were wondering. So, who would be interested in this game? Would you have to? Let's say you have friends that don't play games. They know you do. Is this something that's accessible? Do you feel to just a person who's just trying this out for the first time?
Yeah, I think it's very accessible for someone who's new to gaming, mostly because the mechanics are very easy to grasp. You don't have to spend hours building out characters. We have a scenario book, so you can fill out these dry erase character sheets that are conveniently located in the box with dry erase markers, and just, build it out from there. It's very simple to learn, takes about I want to say half an hour to just figure everything out on your character sheet. And yeah, play through, a one shot is usually about 4 hours. But if you wanted to do many sessions, I would say 2 to 3 sessions or 4 sessions would be a sweet spot for this.
So that's interesting because that's a campaign sort of concept, right? And a lot of times, so I've played all sorts of games this weekend, and some of them are 25 minutes, 30 minutes, these little box things. And then some are these mega games, but still 4 hours, you conquer the world or whatever. But when you have a role-playing thing, this is one of the things that we talk about, you can start to develop this, and people want to keep going, right? They don't want it to end. Right. So is that a possibility, or do you always come to sort of a logical endpoint?
I think sometimes there's a logical endpoint, but if you wanted to keep going, there are options in here for you to sort of homebrew stuff, do your own thing. If you wanted to keep going with the restaurant, you can definitely do that.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that Jiangshi, In The Banquet Hall was co-designed by myself and Samphone Lim, and was co-published by my company, Game and Curry, and Wet Ink Games.
There you go.
So Questlings RPG is co-designed by myself and Tim Devine. It was co-published between Game and Curry and Letterman Games. And so
and Game and Curry is your company.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, my company, Game salmon and curry. So Questlings is it's great for kids. It's great for teachers. It's great for parents. And basically, it's a game about like trying to overcome challenges as a child. So you're a kid. You're playing a kid, and you're living in this town. And sometimes you might encounter like a weird challenge. Maybe you have something to do with like a science fair, and you want to win. You want to win the grand prize of a science fair or something like that. Well, that sounds like a really big challenge. So what you do is to try and overcome these challenges, you would call upon your inner hero. And so your inner hero would help you, and the world turns into a fantasy world, and everything becomes like a fantasy. And you sort of have to like try and figure things out.
So I notice on the cover here, which I'll show closer up, there's these are the inner heroes behind the kids playing.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. So the inner heroes basically are just like the grown-up versions of the kids' selves.
Okay, and of course I'm noticing you've got all the different dice that we have in D&D, so we're training the children early, what's a D20, what's a D8, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
How long did it take you from conception? I mean, obviously you had someone else you were working with. What was that process like? How long?
Yeah. So initially, it was Dan Letzring, the owner of Letterman Games, who reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I want to make a kids game based off of our series of books called So You Wanna Be A." So it was a series of books. So one of them is like, "So You Want to Be a Paladin," or "So You Want to Be a Mage," or something like that. And so they reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, like, let's do something together." And so I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So I came up with the concept. I came up with with a pretty simple system. And it wasn't until later on I started talking to Tim, and he mentioned that he was trying to come up with something similar. And I was like, "Why don't we just work together and like create a thing and make it really, really good?" He also has kids, so I don't have kids. So it was just like, I need someone to work with who has kids so we can find play testers. And so we started working together on this, and he like went through the system. We went through in terms of like development together. We did development, we did play testing. We play tested with like a bunch of kids.
What was that process like? Was that nerve-wracking with kids?
It was chaotic.
Okay.
It was very chaotic. I think the youngest that we play tested it with was 6 years old, and she loved the game. Like all the kids loved the game, but it was very chaotic at times because they would want to do something else, or they would be really focused in the game, or like get really intense with certain spots, and like other kids would be like, "Okay, well, what am I doing now?" And so it was a little trickier playing online because a lot of this was like play tested online because of the pandemic and everything. But once we got around the table, it was a lot more immersive, and the kids loved it.
It's interesting because I saw a documentary years ago where these toy designers, like 6 of them, and the big test is they put these kids in a room and they let them in, and they're all behind these mirrors watching, and a nightmare is if your toy is ignored, right? Because if the kids don't like it, they don't like it. And so it was fascinating because, of course, you're designing for someone, and it's hard to, the play testing process.
Right, exactly.
And in terms of, just because my viewers, of course, love D&D, do you play D&D? Is it something you do? And are you in a campaign right now, or?
One-shots. I am a one-shot person, just because it's so hard for me to, like, find a group together, and, like, a lot of the time, when I play a game, it's play testing. So it's always play testing my own games or someone else's games, like another designer's games. So when I do get to play for fun, it's always a one shot.
Well, and it's interesting because people say to me, you must be, campaigns, and and I have a once a week thing. And with my channel and my work that I do, during the day, it's hard to play, right? It's hard. It's in the days when you could just play every night or two on the weekends or whatever it can be. So if you're busy with stuff, it's hard to do that. Do you play online mostly, or?
Yeah. So most of my games now are online, but we are sort of getting back into real life, right? So when we do get to play in real life, it's like an event. It has to be like really, really epic. So we have to make sure that we have like the popcorn ready, the snacks ready. We have like everything ready, so that way when we're playing, we're fully immersed. We have a soundtrack.
Which is sort of like the online thing, if you think about it, because that came in when I started playing online with the soundtrack, and I hadn't thought of that, to have that in the background while you're playing live.
Yeah, exactly. So when we do it in person, it has to be real good.
Okay. Well, and what online, what systems do you use typically?
So I used to use Roll20.
Okay.
And I used to use, I think it was Roll, but I have for development purposes. I usually use Google Slides or Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia. So it depends on what I'm developing. If it's a board game, Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, those are the two that I use. If it's a role-playing game, Google Slides, because then I could just make edits on the fly. I know it's not convenient for everyone, but for me, it's very convenient.
Well, and I would love to hear some comments of anyone out there that's using Google Slides, because I'm not sure I've heard of that. I know I play occasionally in a group that we just Zoom, Theater of the Mind. We all have dice at home. We all just roll these dice. Yeah. And it's interesting. And then the guy will share his screen and show us images. So maybe that's what the Google Slides is like. It's sort of that. Are you on a Zoom or Discord while you're doing that?
Yeah, so it's usually through Zoom. So how it works is we would have all the character sheets just like laid out in the Google Slides. And if something needed to be edited, I just go back in and like edit it real fast. Or if I wanted to make notes, I would just use a note section on the bottom just to be like, okay, like later on I need to like fix this up or change something here. So that's why I use Google Slides for development. For play, Roll20 would be great. Roll is great. Those two platforms are awesome for just like regular fun play.
Yes, and as my viewers know, I use Fantasy Grounds, which I like because of the automation features. I think Roll20 is easier to get into initially.
Yeah.
Still, I love the you can customize Roll20 to a certain extent, but it's all in there with Fantasy Grounds. But that's another story altogether.
Right.
So you don't have that much opportunity to play role-playing games, but how about every week? How many games do you play a week?
Oh, is this including playtesting?
Playtesting, but also for fun.
I would say I play a game probably 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay, so that's a pretty good time, and that does give you a sense of you are playing games, but you're also working on them and doing all this other stuff that you have to do. The final thing I'm going to ask, if someone would say, hey, I'm really interested in getting into this, I look at what you're doing, I think it must be just totally fun, and you're just playing games. What would you say to someone who is interested in getting into game design, whether it's role-playing, whether it's board games, or anything?
Yeah, so I would think, I would say like looking at the industry itself, like taking a look at what you specifically want to do, because when it comes to game design, it could be like board game design or role-playing game design. And that's totally fine, like if you want to do either or, but there's also writing, right? So do you want to do writing? Does that mean narrative? Does that mean flavor text? Do you want to do something completely different? Does that mean like development? So development's like a whole nother thing. Do you want to do a combination of all of them? That's awesome too. But I think like if you're going to go into something, figure out the purpose, think about like, what you actually want to do. And once you get into it, it's a matter of like, it's a combination of like doing a lot of things and networking and like showing the things that you've done to a lot of people, so that way they'll hire you on for like a contract gig, or if you have an original design, you can find a publisher and pitch that thing to the publisher.
Yes, and one of the things that I would say, and this is going around, so I hate to use it because it's such an overused phrase, the imposter syndrome, right, where people think I'm not good enough to do this. My idea is, oh my God, Banana Chan, well, of course she can do this. Look at all the things she's done. I'm just here with my little idea. And so we are frozen in place, right? We don't show it, or we don't. Mm-hmm. But in fact, you may have some really good ideas, or you may be a person with a unique perspective, or something that people would actually be interested in. Did you ever feel that way? Like, oh my God, I don't really know what I'm doing, or why, that kind of thing?
All the time. I always have imposter syndrome. But I also think that, like, for me, I got over it by thinking about the work, like focus on the work, and not to say like don't think about yourself, do think about yourself, but I would say like focus on the work first and foremost, and that will basically uplift you and make you feel better about, if you have imposter syndrome, make you feel a little better. Okay, so there's some advice, guys. You just, whoever you are out there, if you're interested in this, take her as a real exemplar, not avatar, because she's a real person, but as, this is a field that you can do this. You can go out there if you've got an idea, and like you said, in the networking, and sometimes for people in the RPG world or whatever, sometimes networking, we're afraid to talk to people or whatever. We just want to be with our friends and that kind of thing, which is fine. Because the other thing that you find, like doing everything, writing things, all sorts of projects, it takes work. Yes. And you really got to love it. You really got to be obsessed in a way, right? Yes. Because there will be
things along the way or not feeling like doing it.
Can I nerd out a little bit?
Okay.
Okay. So I love agile frameworks, especially when it comes to project management and trying to figure out like how to manage a project, how to figure out how to like manage like for example like a writing project for like a game, right? So if you're writing a tabletop role-playing game, breaking that down into like smaller size chunks so that way you have an idea of like what to tackle, and breaking those chunks into even smaller bits so that way you have like a task list. So your task list could ask you questions like, what is a part of this world? Oh, okay, I have to tackle maybe like currency for this specific part of the world. What does that look like? And making sure that you have all these task list items just like listed out, it makes things a little bit easier for you to digest so that way when you tackle them, it's there in front of you. It doesn't feel as overwhelming. It's like, it's small, it's manageable. It's not like saying 10,000 words on whatever topic.
Okay, and is this, you mentioned, is there a specific concept or thing where perhaps I could have a link in here to this? Is there something, what's it called again?
Agile frameworks.
How do you spell agile?
Agile.
Agile frameworks,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a lot of companies use it.
Okay.
So a lot of companies use agile frameworks as a way to like manage their teams, make sure that they're doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, and trying to like work together as like a self-sufficient team. So that's basically like where that term comes from, and just like where that thinking comes from.
Okay, and so now I've got a topic for another video because I'm going to do this because, as those of my viewers of my channel know, I began my whole series 2 years ago now on building a world. What do you need? And I was saying you don't have to have it all at once.
Right.
It doesn't all have to be done. You need a place where the players start, some basic ideas. Yes, maybe you need to know the pantheon, the currency, who runs the town. But a lot of stuff when they're first level, or even third, if you're starting there, or potentially fifth, they don't know. They don't know what's the world. They know like the big shots, but they don't know anything in between.
Right.
Create that as the players move through your world. And eventually, it's all there, but it's all there over months and months of playing. And that's what I always try to stress. So I'm going to look into this agile network concept because this might be something that I can apply.
Yeah, it's great for project management. It's great for like trying to figure out how to make a thing, basically.
All right, well, great. Well, see, thank you very much, Banana Chan here. We're at GrandCon, which is now ended, so she has to get back.
Yes.
But I really appreciate it to being on my channel. To all of you, if you like my content, please subscribe. Always looking for more. I would love to hear some comments about our discussion. But most importantly, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.